Hey everyone, welcome to the GTM News Show. My name is Taylor Wells, and in this episode, we are going to be talking about my 16 demand generation predictions for 2024. Lots changed over the last couple of years, and as a demand generation leader for B2B companies, software and service companies, I've seen a lot of things happen over the past couple of years, and then most recently working as a consultant over this last year with a bunch of B2B companies in the demand generation realm. I put together kind of a list of what I think is going to be really important as things that are going to change over the next year and couple years, but then also things you can do differently, right? And how to go to market a little bit differently, how to think about the most efficient ways to go to market. First, before we jump right in, I want to kind of set some context. And we all know that the cost of acquiring customers has only gone up. It's two reasons. Number one is every channel has gotten more saturated, right? The cost to get people's attention and people's attention spans have only gotten more crowded, right? Every channel, whether it's outbound through email or cold calling, social selling, whether it's content, whether it's paid media, all of these different channels and programs have gotten harder and more saturated. Getting people's attention it's only gotten harder. And then the other factor is there's more competition than ever. If you're a service-based company, you have things like globalization, you have things like the remote work world, especially since the pandemic, there's now a million ways to solve any problem. So if you're a service-based business, you can serve people around the world, but now your competition's all around the world as well. If you're a software company, an average software platform has 12 competitors. So unless you're an industry leader or unless you just have something that is groundbreaking and no one else can do it, you probably have a ton of competition in your space. And so between those two things, the getting people's attention has only gotten harder, and there's more competition. It just increased the cost of getting customers, right? And making marketers, sellers' jobs a lot harder. And then also ultimately hitting your revenue goals has become a lot harder. So that's some context. The bad news. The good news, there's also a lot of cool things that are coming out of this, and it's forcing us to get even better at marketing, forcing us to do things differently than we've done in the past. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. These predictions and strategies really come out of more of an enterprise focused motion. So if you're a PLG, product-led growth, we have a very small ACV, annual contract value. Like if you're a couple $100 a year, right, and you're high velocity, a lot of these things won't be as applicable. Some of them will, for sure, as best practices. But a lot of the strategies that I've implemented for my clients are usually higher ACVs, right? Think 5,000, which is like SMB, all the way up into the millions, which is some of my clients have $1 million ACVs, right? Contract values. And then most of them are in that 30,000 to a couple $100,000 ACV. And that's kind of the sweet spot for a lot of these strategies. Anything smaller than that, some of these will work. Anything bigger than that, it gets even more niche. When you're in the $1 million strategies, you just have a different kind of mindset. Once again, some of these will apply, but really kind of the mid-market enterprise level ACVs. Once again, that 30,000 to a couple $100,000 ACVs is a sweet spot for these strategies. Once again, smaller and larger, it will work, but it's more nuanced for high velocity or really low velocity when you get to the Fortune 50 or Fortune 500 deals when you're in the multiple $1 million ACVs. Kind of some context there for you. And once again, kind of going back a step further as well, as we've seen over the last probably 10 years with the cost to borrow money being zero, right? So VCs had a ton of money to invest in companies. It created an environment, in my opinion, of almost an assembly line motion when it comes to marketing and sales. How do we grow the fastest, not necessarily the most efficient, number one, and then also not necessarily the best customer experience. So a lot what I advocate for is getting back to really how do we do great marketing, serve people. And I have this concept that's really it's called the Selfless Advantage. Seems kind of like an oxymoron as a term, but the idea behind the Selfless Advantage is we combine two things. We combine empathy. How do we put ourselves in the buyer's shoes, right? Which I think over the past 10 years and beyond, we haven't put ourselves in the buyer's shoes. We've put ourselves in how do we acquire customers as quickly as possible, not what is the best customer buying experience, not how do customers like to be marketed, not how do we serve first, which is kind of the second part of my selfless advantage, which is being selfless. How do we give without expectation? How do we actually not only market to people in the way they want to be marketed to, but how do we serve people unconditionally through marketing and sales? And this is kind of what this is like, if I could give anything away throughout this entire thing, is this mindset of this selfish advantage has completely changed not only how I think about marketing and sales, but it also makes it so much more enjoyable because I'm able to give to people. I'm able to help people through a medium that historically, especially in B2B, has been very selfish. It's all about growth goals. It's all about us hitting our numbers. Even the terminology we use, sales process, lead magnets, like all these things are very selfish, self-focused, right? And I think because of the growth at all costs mindset over the last 10 years, especially in the B2B world, we've been so focused on, we didn't have to think about them, right? Whereas it's so interesting. If you look at other departments in any company, you look at HR, even finance, even product, customer success, customer service, a lot of those departments, I think, by definition, have been a lot more customer centric, a lot more focused on the customer, focused on providing value, focused on building relationships, etc. Whereas marketing and sales, I think we've just created a culture of ultimately just caring ultimately about ourselves and not thinking about how do people like to be marketed to, number one, and then number two, how do we market to them in a way that's serving them first, building that relationship. And I think you'll hear a lot about reciprocity, right? And I think reciprocity totally works, and if you look at all the data and all the science behind it, reciprocity totally works, right? If you give first, somebody's more inclined to respond to your ask. The problem with that is I think people are expecting that, number one, and reciprocity is kind of, it's like level one, right? Well, it's better than nothing. It's better than being a selfish jerk and all you care about is just cramming something down somebody's throat, for lack of a better expression. Next level of reciprocity, which is really being selfless, is unconditionally providing value with zero expectation. And you probably see Alex Hormozy, he talks about putting deposits in, right? And he talks a lot about reciprocity as a way to grow your business. And I think actually I'm going to go one step further. It's actually about unconditional deposits, right? Where you're not necessarily asking for anything in return. The people that can have that mindset not only market to people to how they want to be marketed to, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, but then also how do we make those deposits unconditionally without asking for anything in return, and then letting them come to us, right? And we'll talk a little bit about kind of those strategies as we think about 2024 and beyond. So I'll get off my soapbox, but just want to give you kind of my mindset as it comes to all of this stuff, this selfless advantage, the combination of being selfless, right? Of ultimately, how do we unconditionally serve people through marketing and sales, providing value, providing impact, but then also how do we have empathy? And then one little note there, empathy, empathy is kind of the table stakes where you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, but psychopaths are very empathetic, right? Cyber criminals, I work with a lot of cybersecurity companies, are very empathetic, right? They put themselves in their shoes to manipulate people. And that's where the selfless part, I think you need to have the combination of being selfless and empathetic to really be able to serve people well, build relationships, drive impact, and ultimately get more customers through marketing and sales. And you also probably noticed I mentioned a lot about sales too. Like this is not just marketing. This is really all your go-to-market motions when it comes to demand generation. Demand generation is not just about generating leads for sales to close or generating pipeline for sales to close. Yes, it's a huge part of it, right? It's that part of the journey, but all sorts of things influence that. How good your product is, your pricing, your competition, your retention rates, your land and do you have a land and expand model? There's all these different factors that influence demand generation and actually creating demand for your product. And so that's why I think it's really important, marketing and sales, and really the whole organization thinking about this idea, and then ultimately also thinking about marketing and sales as a product of its own. It's your first product, and as you'll see as we go through these things, you'll notice it's almost like a product, right? You have to think about your marketing and sales as a product, actually providing impact in exchange for attention, because that's what you're asking your audience for, is attention. So let's jump right into it. My first two predictions, all around AI. So AI has taken the world storm, obviously, in the past year. It's been almost a little over a year since OpenAI launched chat back in November of 2022. It's already affecting marketing and sales. We're already seeing the tools, tons of tools. Every day there's a new AI marketing tool, new AI sales tool that's coming out. Every platform now has some sort of AI component to it. And I'm pretty excited overall for the opportunities to use AI to make our lives easier and more efficient and solve more problems. But I think there's going to be two pretty substantial impacts on marketing and sales. And the number one thing when it comes to demand generation is that because of the ability to create AI content, I predict in 2024 and beyond, we are going to trust the internet even less than we do now. There's going to be so much content on the internet that we don't know who made it. Is it real? Is it fake? And I think people already trust the internet very well, or trust the internet because of cybercrime, fake content, misinformation, politicizing the internet. AI, I predict, is only going to make that worse. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of legislation. I'm sure the big tech companies are going to try to combat this. But overall, I think it's going to be really hard to combat this fact that we're going to have a hard time trusting the internet. So what does that mean for marketing and salespeople? We'll be able to use these tools to make us more efficient, right? But ultimately, we're going to have to tap into relationships to kind of balance this out. And I think relationship-led growth, the ability to leverage community relationships is really going to be super important. So making sure you leverage relationships in addition to the internet, in addition to creating content. How do we actually make meaningful connections? So much of our businesses, so much of my businesses has been based on technology. I think we're going to kind of balance out in a lot of ways in relationships, especially once again in enterprise demand generation and big deal sizes. You'll require more relationships. The second part of the AI predictions is that AI tools will help marketing and sales folks obviously move faster and easier, which will be great in the short term, but will make every channel even more crowded. So if you think channels are crowded now, right, with content, AI will just saturate these channels with more content, right? Like AI is going to, right now it's okay, right? The content is better than some, but overall in a couple of years or even maybe in 2024, the content's going to get so good that it's going to be hard to differentiate between a human and AI. There's going to be more content than ever produced in all these channels. Number one, but then there's going to be less the ability to trust it, right? But really, there's going to be so much saturation. So my second prediction is really we're going to provide more impact. So what I mean by impact, it's kind of I actually got it from Winning by Design. They say the outcome of recurring revenue is the product of reoccurring impact. They use it in their spiced sales process. Value, is a similar word for it, but I think impact, for me personally, I really like that because it encapsulates the idea of actually solving a problem and actually changing, the direction and helping somebody. So number one for AI predictions is because of AI, we're not going to be able to trust the internet even less. So we're going to need more relationships about it. Number two, because every channel is going to be more saturated, we're going to need to provide more value, more impact in those channels with a combination of probably human and AI, tools and information and processing. That the first to provide impact will be the first to win the deal, right? The first to create that relationship connection will be the first to win the deal. And if you can combine both of those two things, that's where you really get the magic. And if you can tap into relationships and provide impact pre-customer, pre them giving you money, that will be the real power. So kind of as we go through these next buckets, my first bucket, I have like 3 or 4 predictions in these next area. And it's really all about relationships. And like I mentioned, I think there's really 2 paths for organizations to grow, and it all falls under the selfless advantage. Number one, how do you get in with relationships? And then number 2, how do you provide impact? How do you provide value pre-customer? How do you actually help them solve a problem pre-customer? And I think the folks that do that and actually combine those two, it's magic. And that's the best marketing, was when you can do both of those 2 things together. And you build that relationship and whatnot. And so let's go right through it. So my next one is customer advocacy. And this falls under the relationship, really relationship-led growth idea, or tapping into relationships. So customer advocacy, I feel, is going to be one of the most important things when it in 2024 as relates to demand generation. Customer advocacy is getting your customers to advocate for you, to refer you, to help you get more customers, essentially. Part of that's customer marketing, right? How do you get your customers to expand and renew and grow with you? That's a huge part of it too. And that's actually something that demand generation can totally help, right? How do you market to your current customers to grow? But in this situation, I'm talking more about how do you get your current customers to help you get net new customers. And this is where customer advocacy falls in. And as there's more competition out there, how do we get our customers to help us grow more? First, marketers and salespeople. This guy I follow, and he's actually going to speak at an event I have coming up. Will Aitken. He's hilarious, and he has a slogan called "Trust me, I'm a salesperson." And I love that because maybe I'll take the "Trust me, I'm a marketer" slogan and use that. But no one trusts a salesperson or marketer, right? Because we have a bias, and especially over the past decades or whatnot, we've trusted them even less because it's all been focused on growth at all cost, right? So what our customers really care about, who they really trust, is their peers, right? And so how do we leverage our customers to then help advocate? Even when we create thought leadership, you can always tell the bias in everything we do, right? It's all towards making us look great, positioning our product, etc. So I think customer advocacy is only becoming more and more important in next year and beyond with AI, with competition, with saturation. The people they trust the most are their customers and their peers ultimately. So in that, a couple ideas here for you. Number one is social proof. So making sure you get reviews on other platforms, right? Getting testimonials, getting case studies, getting your customers to make sure like, hey, we had a great experience with our product. That's kind of table stakes. The next level from that is thought leadership, making sure getting your customers to help you create content, right? And that's where that magic comes in of like providing value and impact, is getting your customers to come on a webinar, to help you speak on a conference, right? Around a topic, not your product, but around a thought leadership topic, something that is providing value and impact and solving a problem through content. And ultimately getting them to help you create content, but then also they're going to talk about your product, right? And my favorite webinars, especially with my clients, are like, we'll do a panel, we'll have a couple prospects on, we'll have a couple customers on, and we'll be talking about a thought leadership topic, right? That values the audience, that values even the panelists, they're learning. And then the product comes up, right? Because of course it does, because it has, the topic has something to do with the product, or maybe second or third degree away from the product, and it comes up. So then you're getting that social proof while you're providing impact. Super cool. It's magic. It's like one of the coolest ways to position your product, to provide value. The best content is that combination of social proof, natural social proof, right? And even just talking about this right now, it's like naturally providing social proof. It's not contrived. It's in the moment, it's contextual, it's live, in addition to providing impact and value through thought leadership. Another thing to throw out for you into this third prediction is warm intros through your community. How do you get warm intros? Through a referral program, through networking, through getting a warm intro from your customers, getting your customers to get you in the door with other customers through warm intros. Super important and worth the investment. And I've definitely seen that pay off for my clients. Awesome. Number 4 prediction is community-led growth. And this is something I'm sure you've heard talk about, but really there's kind of 2 buckets in this, and there's micro communities and there's macro communities. Macro communities would be things like LinkedIn, Reddit, other social media platforms, and tapping into those communities, right? Where you're either engaging in those communities, and there's ways to do it. You can just be a member of that community and providing value, right? As a member, you can sponsor that community and run ads, whatnot, in those types of communities. And then you can also create your own community, and that's where the micro communities come in too. And macro and micro. The micro could also be Slack groups, could be trade shows, associations. And in that, you could be a member, you can sponsor, or you can create your own. And this framework I got from Kathleen Booth from Pavilion, and I really like it. You can either be a member, right, of any one of these communities. The macro communities, just be a member of a social media community like LinkedIn, right, and contribute to that, create content, connect with people, build community that way. I've built this podcast. I've gotten clients from that way. Then also the micro communities. There's different paid and free communities out there, whether association, trade shows, trade associations. These so many micro communities out there, right? And I'm sure there's only going to be more of them made in 2024, even more niche communities based upon folks are trying to connect, right? And really these relationship-based predictions are what people want, right? Like with the lack of trust of the internet, with so many options out there, the number one way people want to find new products, it's through their peers. It's through word of mouth. It's through community. It's through people they trust. Because that's like the best way to find a product. It's tribalism at its finest. It's this person I have an affinity with. I trust them. We have similar standards, similar expectations. They introduce me to a product. They help me solve a problem. They introduce me to a solution to a problem, etc. So it kind of goes back into that. And so it's just kind of natural, right? Tapping into empathy, tapping the way people want to buy is through relationships, is through people they trust, right? And so community is a big part of that. So yeah, this micro communities, right? The Slack groups, whatnot, invest in those as a member. You can sponsor them or you can create your own, which is definitely the hardest. The big communities, you can either be a member of, or you can also, you can also sponsor and invest in that way as well. Number 5 here is strategic partnerships. So this is another form of relationships. Strategic partnerships are, think of them as, they could be a referral program. They could be a co-marketing, co-selling, integrations, ecosystem, app, marketplaces. There's so many different ways to do strategic partnerships. And this would be another phenomenal area to build, to kind of tap into this relationship-led growth, right? Where other companies have relationships with your future customers. Think about it in that way. If they have a complementary product, if they have the same ideal customer as you, you can build a partnership with them to go to market together. Before I jump into that, think about it from an empathy standpoint. Think about putting in your customer's shoes. Customers have so many options to solve a problem. They want to find, and they have, the average company has, 30, it's crazy, especially larger companies. They have 250 to 300 software tools, right? Or some sort of technologies they're using. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out, how can my service providers, how can my software companies, how can my third parties all work together so that and work together to be more efficient, right? Like when I hire somebody, when I buy 2 pieces of software, I just don't want, 1 plus 1 equals 2. I want 1 plus 1 equals 2.5 or 3, right? That I have this combination of tools, this combination of vendors and whatnot, that I get a better outcome because of this partnership, right? And all these tools, all these services are all working together in harmony that you get this better outcome. So that's where I think the idea of strategic partnerships is, if you can go together, if your products and services can work better together, right? Through integrations, through even just co-selling, where you're like, you're positioning your sales folks are positioning the products together and showing like, hey, here's all the additional benefits by using both of us together. And then introductory to that is co-marketing. And co-marketing, I think, is probably, especially for smaller early stage companies, is really this table stakes. All the other ones, co-selling, integrations, the app marketplace, that's very specific to, if you're a tool that is works off of AWS or Shopify or whatever. But the baseline, I think, is co-marketing. Co-marketing allows getting in the door, right? And I do tons of co-marketing for this podcast, right? And for my events. So my podcast, I'm having guests on. That's a co-marketing initiative where I'm having them on. They're going to market it to their audience. I'm marketing to my audience, and we're going to market together, right? We're creating content. We're creating marketing for our audiences together, and we're able to tap into each other's audiences. In 2024, I'm going to do more guest speaking and more going speaking at events and speaking on podcasts and creating content for other people's audiences. And especially if you're getting started out, especially if you don't have a huge audience or a huge customer base, folks probably aren't going to come create content for your audience, right? Or they're going to be more reluctant, especially if they're a bigger company. So in that situation, if you're trying to partner with a bigger company, offer to do all the content marketing for them, right? Offer to ultimately invest in that relationship for them, right? To start. And then maybe they can come create content for your audience. You can do, whether it's doing events together, which is one of my favorite, webinars, workshops, panels, create blog posts for them, create an ebook together, do an after party at a conference together, even run paid ads together, whatever it may be. There's so many different co-marketing initiatives you can do. If you can combine the impact, right, and actually provide value, you can really drive tremendous value in that co-partnership. It's a sweet combination. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that in 2024 and beyond as people get more creative with how to drive impact and drive demand. All right, number 6. Only 10 more folks, and the other ones will be much faster. So we'll get through these. Number 6 is product-led growth. So this is providing impact. And what we see with product-led growth, especially with low ACV, right, low annual contract values, is the ability to do a free trial or a free version of freemium, right, is providing impact before they give you money. And I think we're going to see more of that even in the service realm and even in the enterprise realm. The enterprise realm could be something like a pilot, right? Where you're doing a pilot program where maybe it's really reduced cost or free to try out the product, get it in the doors, get some value, implement it, and then convert over to a paid customer. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and a lot more of that in the higher ACV realm in 2024 and beyond. How can we provide impact the fastest, the time to value, the time to impact? The folks that do it the quickest, especially in your competitive market, will win. And that's, if you have anything to take away from this podcast, those two things. And I think PLG, product-led growth, that concept of using your product to grow, is going to seep more into service-based businesses, right? How do you provide some sort of service, a small version, solve one problem through a mini service or mini offering, and to get them in the door, and then continue to solve more problems with your paid versions, and then also the enterprise through pilot programs, through making a smaller version of your solution from there. Number 7 is thought leadership and content that actually solves a problem. So this is under the impact kind of bucket as well. Solving a problem through your content and thought leadership. So much thought leadership and content out there is just providing opinions, pontificating, and not really solving an actual problem in your thought leadership. And it's lazy. It's a lot of thought leadership has been focused on driving leads, not building an audience, or people want to consume more of your content. How do we get people to sign up for this ebook? How do we get people to sign up for this webinar? And then falling short of actually delivering value to solve a problem. So I predict our thought leadership and content will have to get better with saturation. Your content's only going to have to get better, or you're not going to be able to stand out. And this can kind of be consultative selling, right? That concept. My father was a financial advisor. I worked with him for years. And as a fiduciary advisor, it's really all about building relationships, but it's also about providing impact and showing that you're an expert and building that trust. Building a relationship is about obviously building a connection with somebody, but it's also about building trust too. And I think impact builds trust, right? You're like, hey, this person provided some impact, so I can trust them more to provide more impact later on. So that's where I believe in this. It's all about how do I push people, manipulate them, push them into buying, versus how do I serve? How do I build that relationship? How do I provide value? So actually in the sales process, actually them walking away with, oh man, I actually learned something in that sales process. I got to tell you, most demo experiences, most sales interactions I have nowadays are not, rarely do they actually educate me about the problem I have. That's like table stakes for sales, right? How do they educate me? How do they let me know? How do they help me see the problem in a different light and their solution as the way to solve it, right? But on top of that, the next level is, how do you help them solve one or two pieces of that problem, right? How do you help them solve a version of that problem of, just one thing I noticed is that maybe you should try this in your strategy, or maybe you could use this tool in addition to our tool, right? That's helping them solve another problem and positioning your problem, right? And I think that combination of not only educating them about the problem, right? That's like table stakes for marketing and demand generation and sales. But number 2, your product is the obvious choice to solve that problem. Number 3 is, how do they walk away from every marketing and sales interaction, and especially sales, because it's such an awesome opportunity to provide a one-to-one personalized value impact experience, where they're like, hey, they helped me solve a couple problems in that demo. I would love to get another call with them, right? Because they made me think about the world a different way. They may help me solve problems outside, maybe second or third degree away from their product. Once again, it's all about differentiation, folks, right? It's all about, because everything's saturated, because there's so many products, how is your marketing and sales differentiated? And sales in particular, I think, is probably one of the most phenomenal. And what we're seeing in the next couple of years is the folks that are differentiating their sales process will win more. And part of that is obviously being a great salesperson and educating and enlightening them on why your product is the obvious choice. But then number three is, how do you actually be a consultant? How do you be that trusted advisor where they want to meet with you again because you're just really interesting and you provide really interesting and insightful takeaways from a consultative standpoint, and they want to work with you. And you're also, as a salesperson, you're like, the marketing is obviously the first touch you get as you work with an organization. But as a salesperson, you're like almost the first interaction you have with a company, right? The first really in-depth interaction. And what I've seen is most of it falls short because it's all super selfish. People are tired of it. If you look at the stats, like Gartner did a study, 85% of people don't want to talk to a salesperson. Well, it's not the salespeople's fault. It's the environment we've created for the salespeople. It's not because the salespeople are jerks or psychopaths, or salespeople have been set up for failure. It's all about quota. It's all about closing deals, not building relationships. It's not about providing value and ultimately serving. And so we set them up for failure. So in these first 8 points I've talked about here, taking a step back, it's really, how do we combine all these 8 points? How do we, with a customer, how do we provide thought leadership on a panel with a customer, invite them on with a strategic partner so we can leverage this relationship and impact mindset? How can we get your customer or strategic partner to provide thought leadership through an ad? I got this idea from my friend Casey Hill, who was on the podcast recently. How do you get your partners to come on, create content for you and run it as an ad, right? So you're leveraging the thought leadership, you're leveraging the relationship, and you're delivering it in a really unique format like an ad, which if I could change anything in this industry, it'd be how do you provide impact through ads, right? How do you provide impact through content versus most ads are just really self-focused and not about ultimately being selfless or being empathetic. Go guest speak on a strategic partner's webinar. Another way, right? You can go provide thought leadership on somebody else's webinar or their podcast or write a blog for them. You tap into the relationship element, right? You're tapping into their audience, their relationship, but you're also providing impact. Let's jump into point number 9 here. I think I got this idea from Randy Fishkin from Sparkturo. He talks about the idea that because we're not going to be able to track the buyer's journey, we're going to have to look at vanity metrics more. And this is really interesting, and you could spend a lot of time. I would recommend go watching his webinar on this, or his speech he did for Demand Conference. It's only getting harder to track what's successful and not successful. So we're going to have to use vanity metrics, things that we've always, over the past 10 years, because of performance marketing, we've kind of shied away from. We're going to have to use vanity metrics to kind of indicate what's working, what's not working, traffic, leading indicators, all sorts of things that we're going to have to think outside of the box to actually see if people are going through a process, because the funnel is virtually untrackable. The funnel benchmarks are kind of a joke in general, because benchmarks there's lack of context, and things are changing so fast that even what worked last year, it's going to be hard to predict. So, and then Google is moving away from cookies for Chrome browser in 2024. Apple's only making it harder to track ad impressions. All this privacy, a lot of good things are making it harder to track what's working, especially from the digital world. And so we're going to use vanity metrics, which you can spend a bunch of time about that, and happy to talk more about that if you want to reach out to me. Number 10, short form content. It will only become more popular, and really good long form content will also become really popular, and everything in between will fall short. What do I mean by that? Short form content, we're in a time-constrained world. One of my clients, Greg Brooks, threw out this idea that write and speak for time-constrained people. Right? We're time-constrained. We have so much competition, so much folks trying to get our attention. So create content, and I think short-form content is only going to be a much more effective. I'm actually doing a new event series, which I'll talk more about next week on the show. That's going to be a long-form event, right? 90 minutes long, but it's going to be short form segments where we'll have 9 speakers talking for 9 minutes each on a specific topic, and super fast, super efficient to kind of keep that engagement, number one. Number 2, though, it taps in that long form, so it keeps people engaged long term. So I think short form in general, if you can invest into anything, great short form content, that's really impactful. And then if you're doing long form content, you're just going to get better at it, because there's just so much great long form content out there. And if you are going to do long form content, it just has to get better, because people's attention spans are getting less. But people want long form. If you see podcasts consumption, if you see whatnot, then people want it, but it just has to be really good. Short form, the barrier is, you still have to be really good, but I think if anything, invest in short form, get that right. The long form, if you are going to do it, you just have to get a lot better at it, in my opinion. Number 11 is websites are going to get shorter. Back to that time constraint, I think time on page is going to get less. So these big, especially in the SaaS world, they have these big websites with like hundreds of pages that no one ever views. Some of it's for SEO, I get that. But some of it also, people get lost and it's cluttered and it's like, oh, I just got to kind of tune out. Especially resource pages on people's websites drive me nuts because it's just this like pile of just confusing, and there's no journey I'm taking people on. There's no like, the user experience is really just garbage. So I think with, once again, time constrained, websites are going to get shorter. The copy is going to get shorter. You're going to see a lot more one-page websites out there because of this time constrained. Number 12, brands will move away from focusing on generating leads through content to generate an audience first. My friend Balaji, which I also had on the show, has this concept called before the funnel content, which I love that. I think he's going to start a podcast called Before the Funnel podcast to let everyone know about that, Balaji. But he has this concept, which is really about owned media. And look that up. There's rented media, there's paid media, there's earned media, but owned media is this idea that you can really build your own audience. So much of B2B content, so much of B2B marketing has been about generating leads for sales. That's great. Don't get me wrong. That's awesome. But I think, once again, everyone's doing that. And so it's super saturated and everyone's expecting salespeople to reach out. And it's all optimized for leads, that the content actually isn't that great, right? And it's all about, how do we have a good hook? How do we just ultimately crank something out to generate leads, low intent leads to pass off to sales? And it's not about what I coined this term, subscription-based MQLs, right? MQLs, marketing qualified leads, that folks that are subscribing to your content, they're coming back for more, right? Because the content's so good and they're coming back for more. So it's going to be less about generating leads, right? Because content information is really prolific. You can go buy, Apollo is great in that area. I use Apollo, and I think I get 10,000 contacts a month for like $50 a month or something crazy like that. Verified contacts, verified emails that I can then reach out to people or whatever. So getting people's information is not hard, and salespeople can get that anytime they want. But it's about building an audience. It's about people that want to come back and they're going to open up your emails, going to listen to your podcast, going to come back to more webinars, going to follow you on social media and like your content. They come back for more. Less about generating leads, more about creating an audience. It's before that funnel, right? Like Balaji has that cool concept before the funnel. Owned media is also this term too. Audience Plus is pioneering a lot of this software for that. Anthony Canato, we've had him on the show earlier this year. Also really good stuff. I think can be really important as you move into the next year about building the audience, which isn't new, right? Like newsletters and building a subscription base isn't new, but we haven't really been investing in that. I think as a whole, we've been really investing in generating leads, so then sales and BDRs can go call them, not generating an audience where people are expecting to receive your email every week and want to read it, right? And open it up every week. Number 13 is competitive ads. So like I mentioned earlier, on average, SaaS company has 12 competitors, right? So you're probably seeing this a lot more competitor ads. And the idea is this is like a comparison, right? Like here's, me versus them, right? And it goes down the list of features and here's how we compare. And I did a bunch of research on this in regards to, what the laws are around it. And I recommend your marketing team does this as well. But there's a lot of leeway and actually encouragement to create honest competitor ads and actually label them, right? Like ClickUp did a ton of competitor ads recently that I saw that they were pretty savage, for lack of a better expression, going after I forget Atlassian's product, but they were pretty intense. And you want to have some ethics, you want to have some best practices, but once again, everyone has a competitor. So first, what are your customers thinking? What are your prospects thinking? They're thinking, I don't know how to compare these folks, right? Like, so first educate them on them, like, hey, here's a hopefully as unbiased as possible, right? Comparison of the products and like the feature sets and how we compare. And I think I've seen a lot more of that in the past 6 months. And I think in 2024 and beyond, we're going to see a ton of competitor ads. And I'm working with my clients on more competitor ads. because it's just hard to compare. There's so many options out there. Every day there's a new tool, and people are just kind of, I think people, in my opinion, how I'm experiencing it is I'm just decision fatigue. I'm like, oh, there's so many options. I'm just not going to make any decision. And so that actually, no, the whole ecosystem, the whole marketplace suffers when people don't have clarity. So I think competitor ads help with clarity, help educate the market on how you are different, and look up the laws and the precedents that have been set for how you can put your competitor's logo in the ads, have competitor comparison landing pages where you're comparing the different features, and educate the market on how you're different. Your competitors are probably going to do it. And so you want to make sure you have a voice in there and provide your perspective on it. Number two, there's just so much decision fatigue, right? I'm experiencing it where it's like, oh man, there's so many different options. I'm just not making any decision at all. So we got three more and then we're going to wrap up here. Number 14 is vertical software and services. So once again, everyone has 12 competitors, if not more, especially for new folks who are going to market, early stage companies, where I think we're going to see more vertical products, vertical services out there. What that means is somebody that's serving a specific niche, a specific industry, and not horizontal, right, where you're serving everyone, but you're focused on one industry and service. And I know for my business, I'm thinking about that, right? How do I niche down on my demand gen consulting services? How do I focus and be the only person in this one industry? So when I go to market and I do those competitor ads, or when I compare, it's like, wow, he's like, not only does all of your marketing and sales get better because you're just so focused on industry, but your product gets better too, because it's focused on one particular industry. And you can always add other industries later, right? You can always expand. But I think it's counterintuitive to have a small TAM, small total addressable market, right? It's counterintuitive to want to like say no, because we're like, oh, especially when you're a small company. Like for me, I'm like, I don't want to say no to somebody that's outside of my target market. But if you do want to grow, build something big and make it efficient and have the best marketing, have the best sales, have the best product, I think we're going to see more vertical, industry specific, niche, really focus on one particular segment of the market. So when they do go to market, it's that much more efficient. And also their product is so tailored, no pun intended, to that particular industry that there's just, you're the obvious choice, right? There's no one else in that space. I think that is the future in so many ways. If you're going to market, especially with a product that they're saturated, if you're like building a CRM system, if you're starting a CRM company, I recommend you don't create a CRM company that's like, horizontal, right? Where you're serving everyone, unless you have something that's so much superior to HubSpot and Zoho and Salesforce, that you're just the most, the dominating CRM. You just have something so unique. But maybe you're a CRM company for, bookkeepers in North America, or you're a CRM company for, whatever the industry or niche is that no one else is in, that you can make that product really tailored to that one specific company. Makes your marketing so much easier and sales so much easier. And then I think it makes your product easier as well. I think we'll see a lot more of that in 2024 and beyond. Number 15 is content's going to get more niche down too as well. If you're familiar with the idea of account-based marketing is the idea that you're creating content and marketing and sales is really focused on a target account, right? So there's this idea of one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. What do those mean? One-to-many is that's kind of just general, like broad marketing, right? I'm marketing to this entire segment. ABM is really just great marketing and sales, where you're really focused on that specific company, and everything you do is all around them, right? The content you create even has their logo in the ad, or you're talking to that specific person in that ad or that outreach, and you do tons of research, and the thought leadership is super customized to that company. I think AI is going to help with this and make this a lot easier to create content that's super niche to those particular companies. The personalization of content, of marketing, of sales is going to be more ABM in the future, because that's the only way you're going to stick out. Your ad, if it's generic, if it's talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. If you're talking to that specific company and you're providing value to that specific company, it's really unique. No one's doing that, right? So I think content, similar to your TAM, is going to get niche down, right? You're going to have to focus more on the specific niche, these specific companies, and everything's become more ABM. Everything's become more account-based marketing, and it's going to become smaller, right? You're going to be focused on these specific companies, the specific industry, because not only will your product be the obvious choice because no one else, you're in the options of one, right, at the RFP, but also your content is going to be so unique because you're the only ones creating content for that audience. With that specific, message, with a specific value. And this is one of my favorites. I think growth hacking is probably where this falls in, but it's this idea of how do you use counterintuitive tactics for different channels. For example, instead of asking for a demo in an outbound email, how do you invite them to a webinar, right? So instead of like going in and be like, hey, here's our product, here's our service, whatever, just invite them to a webinar. Invite them to content, right? So you're using a channel that is usually for sales, right? Everyone is expecting an outbound cold email to be about a sales proposal. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying you can't do that well. That's only become really, really hard, especially over the last couple of years with deliverabilities and competition, et cetera. How do you do it in a way that's tasteful and invite them to content, provide value? Even one step further to that, which I haven't really explored too much on my own yet, but I'm going to, especially in 2024, is how does that outbound email have impact in it? So what if it's like, here's 3 tips for how you solve a problem I think you have, right? And you're actually helping them provide value. Think of it as like a newsletter or some sort of lead magnet, but you're delivering that through outbound. So once again, it's taking a channel that's usually used for that, but then using it in a different way. Another one could be like running ads, right? Most ads are just, once again, it's all about the brand, right? Or it's all about generating leads, and it's very typical. Everyone's expecting that. But what they're not expecting is a thought leadership ad. And we've seen this on LinkedIn, right? Thought leadership ads is a new feature they came out with. As a side note, they reduce the organic reach of everyone and then release this new feature around the same time of thought leadership ads. Kind of funny, definitely intentional, I'm sure. But the idea is you create an organic post, right? Just a post that you're like, hey, here's 10 things, here's 10 best practices. And it's about thought leadership. It's about providing value in a post, right? Or any post. It can be any post, but the ones that work really well is a post that's actually interesting. It provides value. And then you can run ads against it and you can boost it, right? You can basically promote that thought leadership ad. And it's so unexpected because you're like, oh, wow, wait, this is a post or is this an ad? And it says it's sponsored right at the top. But when you read them, you're like, oh, wow, this is so interesting. And like, I've met people through this. I had Casey Hill, who was one of my guests on my podcast, ran an ad for Active Campaign. That was a thought leadership ad. And I was like, this is so great. Like, you're providing value through an ad. And it made a connection, right? And really powerful. So I think number 16 is really all about how do you go to a channel in a counterintuitive way. Use counterintuitive tactics in those channels to stand out. And I think we're only going to get more creative in a tasteful way, right? When it's going back to relationships and going back to impact, how do we go to these channels and do it in a way that is so unexpected, right? Where you're mixing tactics, right? Is what you're doing. You're like taking one tactic over here and then you're delivering it in a new way, a fresh way, hugely impactful. I've seen over the past couple of years, and I think we're going to get more into that. So we've gone through a lot today. Thanks for sticking with me. We've gone through these 16 different tactics. Once again, with the world of AI, saturation, so much competition, get back to relationships and get back to impact. If you're fostering relationships through your customers, through advocates, through communities, through strategic partnerships, doing those things, and then you're also providing impact through content, through a miniature version of your product, through a sales experience that's super powerful and impactful and actually providing value, you're going to win more. And it's worked for me personally in my business. It's worked for my clients. It's worked through my career. AI is going to help us. People are creating tools that are going to help us do those things and facilitate those things better. But the folks that ultimately can make the connection through a relationship and provide value, the time to relationship, you can shorten that, you're going to win, especially in a competitive space. Obviously have a great product, obviously provide the product actually works. And, and I think that's where marketing and sales can help, from a demand gen standpoint, like, hey, we have all these, competition out there. Feeding that information back to product can be really helpful, right? Doing market studies, how to make the product better. And that's how you'll go to market even better, right? And how you'll generate demand even better. But in addition to that, everyone's making their product better. And so how do you make your marketing and sales a differentiator? And you can do that through these 16 ideas, going back to ultimately the selfless advantage, right? How do you put yourselves in their shoes through empathy? And then how do you serve unconditionally? How do you provide value with zero expectation? If you go in with that heart, with that mindset, you'll do awesome marketing, you'll do awesome sales, you'll grow more efficiently and win more in 2024 and beyond. So thanks everyone for listening. Really appreciate you tuning in. I know this is a long episode, but I hope it was of value. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Next week, we're going to do my final episode for the year when we talk about what's in store for GTM news and me and personally and where I'm going in the next year. Still figuring it out, so hopefully I'll figure it out by then. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.